So for everybody here today, this is the first time you've used this software. This is the first time that we've tried to do an interactive coaching session online. So it's exciting for all of us. It is new, so we are going to be learning as we go. By all means, if you've got any questions, put your hand up and I will unmute you and you'll be able to talk to me. So Michael or Daniela, who have we got there that'd like to say something now?
How my thing to where I want to chat to, it won't let me go to entire audience. It's covered, so I don't know their full name.
Okay, you might just have to manipulate your screen, move it around a little bit so that you can move it left and right so that you can see everybody's names.
But when I move the screen, the thing goes, it goes away.
I can't help you much with how the stuff on your screen is set up. Hopefully there won't be too much chatting in between you, the participant, and other participants. So we'll just have to make do with that as best we can. Andrew Fifield. Andrew, what have you got to say?
The mic work?
Your microphone does work, Andrew.
My mic does work?
I can hear you, and everyone else can hear you too.
Oh, good.
Welcome, Andrew. Everybody, if you haven't had a chance to read the area that I've highlighted in yellow over here, just read through that little story, and that will give you an idea about what you're trying to do in this puzzle to solve this this puzzle that you can see on the screen. And I'll just keep answering people's questions while you're thinking about that puzzle. Jamison, you've got something to say?
Yeah, I'm on, but Morgan's not on. He doesn't know how to log on. Do you know how to do that?
You and Morgan are welcome to sit down next to each other and share a computer for today if you'd like to. That'd be fine. Otherwise, to log on, you just click on the link that's in the email that I sent you. So you got a registration email, and about an hour before this session started, so about 6 o'clock tonight, you would have got an email from me telling you how to log on again. All right, so hopefully you'll be able to just do that, or else, Jamison, just you and Morgan will have to share. Alex, I've got you open here.
Well, when I was putting the cursor down to see all the people and I let go, it all went away. So how do I put it back?
All gone away, has it?
Yeah, all the people are just like...
All the people have disappeared.
Okay. Dad's here, he'll fix it.
Good-o. I can't see what... You found it?
No, that's all right.
Yep.
We've had a phone call from Daniel Yang. Have they got an email to attend?
Anyone who doesn't have an email to attend, they can just jump on and re-register. That would be the easiest way of doing it. So if you've got a friend who's meant to be here,
Re-register.
just
Will
re-register.
They get in tonight, though?
Yeah, they'll get in tonight still. We had a couple of people who typed in their email address incorrectly.
Okay,
So
we'll
that
get
was a
them to
problem.
re-register.
Yeah, re-register
do
and
we
then log
actually
on now.
play chess computer games?
Don't
Do we
talk.
play games against each other?
We won't be playing many games against each other tonight. Tonight we're going to try and have a lesson and learn a few things, and then we'll see how it goes from there, okay? All right, I'm muting you, Alex. I can't hear you anymore. All right, Imhara, I should be able to hear you now. Not yet. Let me try that again. Rosanna, I'm trying to hear Imahara, but I haven't. All right, I've started the timer so everyone can see that the lesson is officially started now. No, I still can't get Imahara. I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, Adam, I'm just waiting for Mason to see if Mason's back online. I will be able to see who is paying attention and who's not paying attention as well, so that should that should help. All right, well, hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a bit of a look at the puzzle. If you think you've got the answer, then what I'd like you to do, hi Darcy, we have officially started. Andreas has asked, how can I see you if your hand's up? I've got a little thing on the screen, on my screen, which shows that the hand's up. So yeah, we have officially started. What I'm going to do is now prevent you guys from chatting with each other. Sorry about that. So you can only chat with me now. So if you'd like to say something, either put your hand up. Aha, we've got Sasha. Let's see if we can get you. Sasha, would you like to say something? Sasha, I can hear you.
Oh, no.
Oh yes, we can all hear you, Sasha.
No.
All right, that's all we need to know. We can hear you. I'm just trying again to get Imhara here. All right, for people who've been having a look at this puzzle while we're trying to solve these initial teething questions, if you've had a look at the puzzle and you'd like to type in the chat box, then type in the chat box what you think the answer is going to be to that puzzle so that I'll be able to see what the answer is, and you'll just chat that to me. Alex says there's no question on the puzzle. The question is really, what would white do in this position? It's white's turn to move, and just stick in the answers that you think the answer will be, and that will come through to me. Chris Fu, have we got you on the line?
Yeah.
Hello, Chris, have we got you here?
Yes.
Good boy, excellent. So just have a look at the puzzle on the screen and type in chat what you think the answer should be. We've got quite a few people who've already typed that answer in. A few people have even got it right. So well done for the fastest person to get it correct. Jamison, you were the fastest to get an answer in, but it was incorrect, I'm afraid. But Joseph, good work, Joseph. You got the first move right. Chris, have you got something to say to us?
Yes. Where do we type it?
Sorry, you have to say that again. Where do you type it?
Yeah.
Yep, down the bottom of the screen. Of your sort of bar where you can see what's going on, there is a chat spot. Here is the chat. So you should have a chat at the bottom of the screen. It's just called chat, so you should be able to find that. Good luck with that if you can. I'm still having trouble getting Imhara. All right, we're just going to plow ahead now and hope that everybody copes with this. We've got a whole heap of answers coming in here, so I can see what you've done. Sasha's put in the answer. Joseph, Michael, Jamison. Anthony's a slow typer. Ben Harris has got the moves. All right, so hopefully we've had a chance to have a look at that. The way to solve this puzzle. The way to solve this puzzle that's on the screen at the moment is by imagining what the final position is that you're aiming for. And by looking at the final position in your mind, you'll be able to actually work through step by step to get to where it is. If you notice that we've got this bishop on the same diagonal pointing straight towards black's king, you've got that diagonal. All you need to do is just open that diagonal up. Black's king's only got 2 squares that are safe. So we've got to try and work out a way that we're going to attack both of those squares. So a lot of you have worked out the correct answer. Thanks, Max. You've got it. And Isaac, that was pretty easy. The first move, zoom the rook down to g8, puts black into check. There's only one move that black can play. The next move, zoom the next rook down to check. There's only one move that he can play. Then push your pawn forwards to e7, opening up the bishop on the king. And there's only two more moves left. Black can sacrifice his rook, get taken, sacrifice his queen, and there's the checkmate. So the challenge was, in the starting position, if we go back to the start, in the initial position, to imagine that final position before you make your first move. All right? Part of what we're doing today, as well as trying to learn about a few strategies for chess, we are also hoping to learn a little bit more about how this software works so that you'll be able to get more and more out of every lesson as we go on. So what I'm going to do now is just launch a poll, so that is ask you a question, and you should be able to see now on the screen a question. It's asking you a question about the puzzle. Just click on that. 15, 20% of people have voted, 23%, 30, 40%. We're doing well. Still got a few more people yet to vote. %, 100% of people have voted. All right. Now, that poll has just been completed. I'm just trying to work out for myself as well how I can show you the answers. 23% of people said it was too easy for you. Here you go, let's have a look at that. I'll try and remember that, Janelle, thank you. So there we go, that's the answers. 23% thought it was too easy. A couple of people thought it was too hard, but that's good to know. That's good to know. All right, we're now going to move on to the first part of our lesson. And today's lesson is going to be about pawn structure. So let's go through to, I'm just going to change my screen, 1 to 1. Now you should be able to see a position that's about to show up on your screen with a pawn structure. So what I'd like you to do is have a look at the pawn structure that's in front of you. Have a bit of a think about the good and the bad aspects of both black and white's pawn structure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give some people the ability to actually draw on the screen to circle some of the key elements in this pawn structure position over here. Okay? So now let me give you the power to do that. So Joseph, you've chatted a couple of answers to me. You've typed in a couple of answers. Joseph, if you wouldn't mind, please, on your screen, you should have something which says a Drawing Tools menu. And if you click on the Drawing Tools menu, you can select a pen, and you should be able to draw on your screen. Congratulations, you've worked out how to draw on the screen. Thanks for that. Bit messy. But what I'd like to do is just to, let's have one person drawing at a time, and we'll just try and draw circle a few certain things. So let's just going to erase those. I'd like somebody, I'm just going to get rid of those. Joseph, if you could please first of all just circle the doubled pawns on the screen. All right, so Joseph, if you can circle the doubled pawns. We've got a lot of good answers coming in here. White doesn't have any doubled or isolated pawns. Black's got some doubled pawns. We've got the double pawn circled. That's great. Liam, would you like to circle the pawn chain? Because Liam suggested that there's a pawn chain somewhere. So let's have a go at circling the pawn chain, Liam. We're having a bit of fun with this drawing, aren't we? It's a bit messy. It's a bit messy. All right, I'm going to I'm going to stop your fun, guys. I'm going to stop your fun here, guys. Sorry about that. And get rid of the drawing that's on the screen. I'm going to have a bit of a turn. All right, let's go and have a look at a few of the aspects that we're trying to look at. First of all, the strong points about this position. We have, first of all, a pawn chain. Right? White has got 3 pawns in a diagonal line, and that's what we call a pawn chain. That's obviously a strong element of the game. The pawn at the top of the pawn chain, that pawn there on d4, very hard for anybody to attack that pawn because it's so well supported. That's what's known as a granite pawn. Okay, so often people will say, oh, that bishop is biting on granite. Now, granite is a very strong, hard rock, and so you can see that if you were biting on granite, you'd be more likely to break your teeth than break the rock. So here that pawn on d4 is known as a granite pawn, and that's the strongest pawn. Right, we have another really strong pawn formation here, and that's these 2 pawns next to each other. When you've got 2 pawns next to each other, we call that a pawn wall. And a wall of pawns is your strongest attacking formation because you'll see that that covers all 4 squares in front of those pawns. So because you're covering a lot of territory, it prevents your opponent from coming in and attacking you. Okay, so here we have a wall of pawns, 2 pawns next to each other. Joseph suggested that it's called hanging pawns. Not quite the case. Hanging pawns, Joseph, would be if this pawn here was missing as well. You'd be able to call those hanging pawns, where they're not protected by anything, but they're sitting next to each other. We call 2 pawns next to each other a wall of pawns. So that's our strongest attacking formation. All right, so we've seen a few strong points in this position. We've seen the chain of pawns. We've seen the granite pawn at the top of the chain. And we've seen the pawn wall. Keep those in mind for later on in the lesson. Another thing that a few people have talked about is the people have talked about pawn islands. And what we have here is an island of pawns. Okay, so white has got an island of pawns, and that is a series of pawns that can move forwards, so only one of them will be not protected by another pawn. And you can see in this position, only this pawn on b2, that's not protected by a pawn. All the other pawns in this island are protected by a pawn. Okay, let's get rid of that on the screen, and we'll try showing you another island of pawns. White has another island of pawns over here. 3 pawns, only one of them not protected by a pawn. So that's called an island of pawns. White in total has 2 pawn islands. One on the queen side, one on the king side. I'll just highlight those so we should be able to see a red dot on your screen shortly. And we've got a pawn island on, one on each side. Black has 4 pawn islands. Black has 4 pawn islands. To show you the 4 pawn islands, we have 1 pawn island here, 2 pawn islands, 3 pawn islands, and 4 pawn islands. So the question is an island strong or weak? And a few people already probably know that answer. That a pawn island is weak. You want to have as few pawn islands as possible. The more pawn islands you have, the more weak pawns you will have. So let's have a look in this position at a few weak pawns. All right, first of all, we have what's known as a backwards pawn. Okay, white has a backwards pawn. This pawn here are not protected by another pawn. So a pawn that is not protected by another pawn, we call that a backwards pawn, and that is weak. That's susceptible to attack. Particularly the pawn on G2, that is highlighted, is particularly weak because not only is it not protected by a pawn, but should it move forwards, it's going to get captured by an enemy pawn. Okay, so that's a particularly weak pawn, the pawn on G2. Black has some weak pawns as well. All right, Black's weak pawns, I better make them weak. Doubled pawns, two pawns that are in front of each other. The pawn at the back obviously has a bit of a tough time running forwards because there's somebody in his way. So doubled pawns can be weak. Doubled pawns here as well. There's a question as to whether they're weak or strong. So doubled pawns on the side of the board. There's an isolated pawn. The pawn on C6 is an isolated pawn. The pawn on H4 is an isolated pawn as well. An isolated pawn is a pawn who has no friends next to him. So this pawn on H4, the pawn on C6, and also the doubled pawns on the A file, no friendly pawns can protect them. So that's what's known as isolated. Joseph suggested we've got doubled isolated pawns on the A file. They could be particularly weak. All right, so we've hopefully try and remember this. We do have a question from Alex. Alex, do you have a question for us?
Yeah, I've got a few, but because I'm starting to lose connection time to time. But yeah, it's not a small problem. And oh, I forgot. Like yeah, I'm losing connection from time to time.
Okay, a couple of people have said that my voice keeps dropping out. So what I'll do, I'll try to speak a bit slower, and perhaps if I speak a bit slower, the voice connection will be a bit better. So Darcy, I do see what you're saying. Thank you for that. And I'll try and slow down a little bit. And if I talk a bit slower, hopefully the voice connection will be a bit more stable and I won't drop out so much. Dropped off again. Thanks, Liam and Joseph. We'll do our best. See how we go with this. All right, we'll do our best. All right, there will be a test at the end of today. Right, there will be a test at the end of today. So make sure that you understand all of the things that I have been talking about. And if you have any questions, put your hand up and ask, because as I said, we will have a test at the end of the day. The main thing in this position is to understand the difference between, or to be able to identify some strong pawns and some strong pawn features and some weak pawns and some weak pawn structures. Right, so the strong ones we need to be able to identify are the pawn chain, the pawn wall, and the granite pawn, the strong pawn at the top of the chain. The weak pawns, we've got to identify doubled pawns, backward pawns, and isolated pawns. All right, so see how we go just identifying all of those. We've got a question from May.
Sorry?
Hello, May. Do you have a question?
No.
No, you're okay?
Yeah.
All right. I've got a question from Michael.
You just dropped a lot.
I just dropped a lot, did I?
Yeah.
This is.
You didn't hear anything.
Couldn't hear anything. All right. This is a bit of a test run, so we'll see how this goes. There are some things I can do on my end to try and improve the sound, so I'll let you know how it goes. You know, if hopefully we get enough sound out of it, but we'll get the keep on going with the lesson, and you guys will just have to do the best you can with the sound. Alex, how are we going with sound?
Good. It's just that Black's got a small pawn chain on F7 and E6.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that comment. This pawn,
And yeah, and the combo on F7 on F6 is a small island. I think. Does that count as an island?
yeah, an island is any group of pawns that can protect each other with only one pawn being weak. So what you can see with F7, F6 and E6 is an island of pawns, because you could move the pawn from F6 forwards and only one pawn would be weak. I don't really call two pawns in a diagonal line a chain. A pawn chain for me really has to be at least 3 pawns. Okay, has to be at least 3 pawns to be a chain. Obviously those pawns are protecting each other. The pawn on F7 is protecting that pawn, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it a chain. All right, now that we understand pawns in a bit better, I'm going to show you a different position. Okay, so hopefully you can now see this new position. Yep, we've got everybody on the new position, which is a pawn structure where we're looking to try and work out what pawn breaks we can play. So a pawn break is an attacking move. A pawn break is an attacking move that will guarantee an exchange of pawns. Okay, we've had a couple of good answers, Isaac and Joseph. Thank you very much for those. And just to illustrate some possibilities, Sasha, Joseph, Anthony, good work. Isaac, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you the ability to make a move on my chessboard. So Isaac, if you'd like to make a move on my chessboard, you should just be able to control my mouse now. And you've made the move that is the pawn break. Very good. All right, so Isaac's been able to make a move. That gives us an idea of how it's possible to have control from other people can make moves on my chessboard. All right, so that's a pawn break. Now, there are other pawn breaks in this position. I'm just going to cancel that one for a second. A couple of people have suggested some other pawn breaks. Isaac, okay, I'll let you have another go. Go for it, Isaac. What's the other pawn break that white could play? The other one, that's correct. The other one is C3. So because this is chess-based, we can only do one move at a time. So C3 is the other possibility. C3 is the other possible pawn break. So a pawn break is a place where you can guarantee the exchange of pawns. You get to choose when the pawns get swapped off. Now, we'll just first of all look at the move that Isaac's just played, which is pawn to C3. Okay? I'm just trying to work out how can I stop Alex from... So I'm just trying to work out how I can take control away from Isaac, sorry. I want to give keyboard and mouse control to nobody. Not quite sure how to do that. All right, we're learning as we go. So this move, pawn to C3, guarantees an exchange of pawns. Whenever white wants to, white can capture the pawn. So whenever you do a pawn break, there are obviously two options. You can either get taken or not be taken. Now in this pawn break here, should black capture and you capture back, black now has this nice open file down towards your weak pawn. This is called a backwards pawn. It's not protected by one of your own pawns. So you can see that that's now a backwards pawn and you've given black an open file. So you're probably only going to be playing this pawn break if you can very soon afterwards advance your pawn here, and then when we exchange off pawn for pawn again, and white will capture this pawn, white will end up with a pawn in the middle of the board, and black will have no pawns in the middle of the board, assuming that white can capture this pawn on d4. Okay, so we'll go back to the start, and we'll just see that again. In this position, if white is going to play the pawn break pawn to c3, he wants to make sure that after the exchange of pawns, he can push his pawn forwards to d4 as well. If he can't push his pawn forwards to d4 as well, he's going to be left with a backwards pawn. So we'll go back and we'll have a look instead at f4. If white plays f4 as a pawn break, again, black could capture, and if black captures, white takes back. Now, white has got a wall of pawns, strong pawns in the center of the board, controlling all of these squares down the middle, and at some stage we'll possibly even be able to play pawn to e5 and create a passed pawn that will be useful down here in the end of the game. So f4 is going to be a better pawn break if black takes you. Now what about if black chooses not to capture? Well, if you've played pawn to c3 and black decides not to capture, you can capture them, giving yourself an open file on the c file whenever you're ready. So you get to choose when the c file becomes open, and if you choose the c file to become open, you can choose for it to come open when you've got your attack ready to go. Same thing happens on the other side. If you play pawn to f4 and black chooses not to take you, you can build up all of your pieces on the f file, and then when you're ready, capture black. So when he takes you back, your powerful pieces come zooming down the board. Right? You've opened up that file when you're ready to. The other thing about this pawn exchange is that black's pawn on e5 is weaker in this position than white's weak pawn. Right? Each person has to have a pawn at the bottom of the chain, but white's weak pawn is protected, it's quite close to his side of the board, whereas black's weak pawn is going to be attacked. All right, Michael, have you got a question for me about pawn breaks?
I'll just like to say that he has no strong pieces, he's only got pawns.
That's true. What we're looking at is just the pawn structure and thinking about an idea of what should be happening in a game. We'll see the position with some pieces later on, but for the moment, we just want to have a look at what the plan of attack or what the idea would be if there was no pieces on the board. All right, good question. Alex, have you got a question for me as well?
Yeah. You've been dropping off a lot.
Been dropping off a lot.
Like 15, 16 times. So I don't know. Something must be wrong with the connection.
Well, we'll keep doing the best we can. I'll fiddle around with it a little bit on this end, but hopefully we'll get a chance to most people to hear most things. We'll see how it goes. Darcy, do you have a question for me about pawn breaks?
Would this be used in the middle game or the end game or like at the start?
Pawn breaks are important any time during the game. Like in the opening, you should be thinking about where the pawn breaks...
You could just use it any time.
Yeah, you could use pawn breaks at any time. They are an attacking move. A pawn break is an attacking move. So you're going to want to do a pawn break when you're ready to attack. But it's worthwhile thinking in the opening, where are my pawn breaks going to be later in the game? And in the end game, or in the middle game, how am I going to get my pieces through to attack my opponent? And if you want to try and get all of your strong pieces, like your rooks, attacking towards your opponent's territory, well, you can't do that if there's pawns in the way. So you have to think about a place where there are pawn breaks so you can open up the position and get an attack going. Anthony, do you have a question for me?
Yes and no. Well, I still consider f4 to be the most beneficial pawn break. Wouldn't it also be helpful to have your pawn on b2 and a2 to be on b3 and a4?
All right, so Anthony's question is, should you have your pawns moving forwards like that? So move this pawn forwards here.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then move that pawn forwards here.
Because that would essentially block off the queen side.
My answer to that is to think about what your opponent's pawn breaks are going to be. So if you look at this position here, black's got the opportunity to play a pawn break by shoving a pawn up onto b5, exchanging pawns. He's also got the possibility of advancing a pawn to c4 and doing a pawn break. So you've given black two possibilities as to pawn breaks, whereas if you stay back in the original position before you move those pawns forwards, black has got the pawn break on by moving his pawn forwards to c4. Black's got a pawn break by moving to f5, but black doesn't have the same pawn break on b5. So it's actually better to keep your pawns on that on their original squares. Josh, have you got a question for me? Sorry, Josh, I
Can
can't.
you hear me?
I can hear you, Josh. What's your question?
It's still breaking out, and you're still stopping it sometimes and starting again.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Josh. We'll just have to fight on, even if there's some bad sound. I am recording this, so you'll all be able to observe it and watch it as a video later on, and hopefully the video will have the top quality of sound. I'm trying to fiddle around a little bit with the audio that I've got to try and make it a lower quality so it transfers faster. Hopefully that'll help. But like I said, Josh, this is just the first time, so we are just testing things out, and hopefully we're learning as we go. It'll improve each time. So that's why we've got these trial sessions going. Nathan, you've got a question for us.
Hi, David.
Hi, Nathan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I've just gone back to that A4B3 point that was made earlier. I'm thinking that it weakens the dark squares around the pawns, and it could be easy for a king to get in the endgame.
Correct. That's another reason why you wouldn't want to advance those pawns from A2 and B2, because if you move them all onto white squares, you've got nothing protecting your dark squares. Generally, pawns are safest. Sorry, what did you have to say, Nathan?
That was just what I was going to say.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thanks, Nathan. Generally, pawns are safest on their original squares. Right? Obviously, you need to move those pawns forwards to let your pieces out, but they tend to be the safest on their original squares. All right. So in this position, we're looking at pawn breaks. We've seen a couple of possibilities. Pawn breaks for white, and we've also got the pawn breaks for black as f5 and c4 are the two possibilities for pawn breaks for black. All right. Again, you've got to think about if you're black and you're playing a move like f5. Right. This is most likely not going to be a great move, because when you get captured, you're leaving this pawn here on e5 very weak. All right? White's got a half-open file, a lot of space, and that pawn's going to be quite weak. So unless black's not going to play f5 unless they can get a really powerful attack down the f file, okay? Because pawn breaks are all about creating attacks, creating open files. Black's best move is going to, or best pawn break is generally going to be pawn to c4, because by moving that pawn forwards, you can exchange pawns anytime you want. When you exchange pawns here, you'll see that now white has a weak pawn here, which is susceptible to attack, and black has a really powerful open file down the c file. Okay, so generally black's pawn break will be in that position, but it's important to understand why the pawn breaks are good, what happens, what you're trying to aim for when you do a pawn break. Okay, so the idea of a pawn break is to exchange pawns. It's a place where you can guarantee an exchange of pawns, and where you can create an open file when you're ready to create an open file, and it is a very attacking move. All right, what I'm going to do is get into a game. So let's close this one down, and we'll get into a game, and we'll see. Let's get rid of all of these ones. We're going to now see a full game in action and see how this idea of pawn breaks and weak pawns actually plays out in a full tournament game. All All right, so we're going to go through move by move, and I'll be explaining to you what's happening at each step of the way. A standard Queen's Gambit opening, the first few moves of this game, and White's third move is a very unusual third move for the Queen's Gambit. Which is to play pawn takes pawn. All right, so you might sort of normally you'd think, well, hang on a second, that's probably not the best move, because straight away you've given black the opportunity to open up this bishop. Right, this bishop that's sitting on c8 is normally blocked in by the pawn, but when you capture straight away, he captures back and opens up the bishop. The plan here for White is that generally White finds it easier to attack down this half-open file than Black does to attack down the half-open file on the E file. And if you, we'll have a look at the pawn structure in just a second. Okay, knight comes out, the knights develop themselves, bishop pins the knight, pawn to E3, castles, queen C2, and then pawn to C6. Right, so if we look at the pawn structure in this position, you'll understand why it's easier for White to attack down the C file than for Black to attack down the E file. And if anybody would like to, if anyone would like to have a bit of a guess as to why, you can text that to me in a chat. You can tell me why you think the why you think that it's easier for White to attack down the C file than it is for Black to attack down the E file, because that's really the key to this game, is to be able to work out why is it easier for White to attack down the C file on that half-open file than it is for Black to attack. So if anyone's got an idea, just text it to me or stick your hand up. Got a couple of people who've got some suggestions. Andreas, Michael. Michael, what's your suggestion?
Oh, well, it's not about this, but when will we actually get to play a game?
You'll get a chance to play against each other online, but for today we're just trying to get through and do a lesson, see if we can get through this game, learn as much as we can from this game. Josh, do you want to, you've got your hand up. Josh, do you want to tell me why do you think it's easier for White to attack down the C file than it is for Black to attack down the E file? Josh, you with me?
Yeah, because the knight is in front of the queen where the knight can just move, and the queen is attacking right down the file, okay. And the bishop is blocking the queen in, and the pawn structure on the F, E, and D. Mm-hmm. Is blocking the queen from coming to the king and getting to the king's side. Okay, that's a good idea. I'm going to hear from Andrew. Andrew, do you want to tell me what your thoughts are about this?
Oh, okay. Well, the queen can get up the C file, and Black's going to have problems getting down the E file because the bishop. Like, Black's bishop is, well, pin is like stopping the pin of the knight.
Yep.
And Black hasn't actually got any pieces on the file yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about long term. That's some good ideas about short term. But long term, Jamison, can you give us an idea about long term? Why do you think it's going to be easier for White in this whole game to attack down the C file? Jamison, you with me?
Yep.
What are your thoughts about this position?
Well, I think that Black's already castled near the E file, and he needs to attack and defend with the pieces that are already defending his king. Mm-hmm. If White develops his pieces towards the C file, then he can castle on the king side, and then he can use all his pieces on the queen side to attack the c file.
Yeah, that's a good point. In this position, White has two possible plans of attack. One is the plan of attack that we're going to see in this game, which is known as a minority attack. The other plan of attack is to castle queenside and go for a big pawn storm and attack with all his pieces against the king. So there are two options. I'll just take one more. Nathan, do you want to tell us what your thoughts are about long-term attacking possibilities in this position?
I was just going to say the minority attack before you...
Oh, you're going to say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Isaac, do you want to tell me a little bit about...
White can go for the center with f3 and e4 as well.
Yep, White can certainly play for the center with pawn to f3 and e4. Right, that's a great way of getting another pawn break. You have two pawns next to each other, guaranteeing exchange of pawns for pawn. In this position, the key thing to understand is if you know about pawn breaks, you'll know why the minority attack works. The minority attack, which we'll see in this game, is where White's pawn is going to shoot up to b5 and do a pawn break. It's going to be an exchange of pawns for pawn, opening up the c file and the b file for attack. And it's much easier for White to play pawn to b5 to do a pawn break, much easier than for Black to try and do his pawn break with pawn to f5 and then f4. Right? I think what's happening with some of the audio is that as I'm moving pieces on the board and refreshing the screen there, it's slowing down the talking. So I'll try and talk or move pieces and not do both at the same time, because I think that's slowing us down a little bit. But the key thing is here, Black's going to find it very hard to do a pawn break by f5, f4, very hard, whereas White's going to find it a lot easier to shoot his pawn forwards to b5 and exchange pawns around this side of the board. Okay, I'll have one more quick question from Andreas. What have you got to say, Andreas?
Oh, am I on?
You're on, Andreas.
Am I on? Oh, I thought I lost you. Oh.
You're with me. Okay, I'm turning you off, Andreas. If you've got nothing to say, I'm turning you off. Imahara, have you got something to say? Imahara, I think this is the first time we've actually got you.
So,
You got something to say? All right, we'll keep on. No, I'll keep on going. I'll keep on going then. All right. So this is the whole plan of this game, is that White's going to do a pawn advance on the queen side, exchange off pawns for pawn, and start attacking the queen side over there. Now that's a pawn break with the pawn getting to b5, exchanging on c6, because it's going to open up some files, and particularly the hope is that Black's c6 pawn will become then very weak, because when you exchange pawn for pawn from b5 to c6, that's going to then take back and end up being very weak. All right, let's have a look. Imahara, I'll give you a chance to say something if you've got some questions, and we're going to keep on moving with this game. Imahara, have you got something to say?
I got to go.
Okay. No worries. If people are going to have to, if there's a couple of people who've already had to leave, there's no problems there. You'll be able to watch the whole thing as a video later on. All right, White's just played bishop to d3. And what we're doing with bishop to d3 is actually threatening to win a pawn on h6 just by playing bishop takes knight, and then next move the pawn on h7 is gone. Joseph asks, does White have an outpost on e5? All right, so the question was, is e5, I'll make it yellow, is e5 an outpost. Now the definition of an outpost is that it's a square that is protected by one of your pawns. So white's pawn is protecting on e5, but you cannot say it's an outpost. Congratulations, Sasha. It's not an outpost because black could play pawn to f6 and chase that knight away later on. Okay, so that knight could chase away the knight from e5, so it's not really counted as an outpost. All right, let's keep on going with this game. Black plays knight to d7, protecting that pawn on h7. So now if bishop takes knight on f6, knight takes knight on f6, covers the pawn on h7. And we'll go through a couple more moves. Knight f3, rook e8, white castles, pawn to h6, and bishop to f4. All right, now the bishop on f4 is going to be posing a good attack down this side of the board for later on in the game. Okay, it's going to be a really powerful bishop to help with the queenside attack. So a quick question, what would happen if black plays knight to h5 to try and get rid of this bishop? Because this is a very powerful bishop here on f4, so black could play knight h5, swap off that bishop, and now white's bishop isn't going to be able to attack on the queen side later on in the game. So what's the tactics there that white could play if black plays knight h5? Jamison suggested bishop h7. That's a check, but the king can just get out of check. You're still going to lose that bishop on f4. And this bishop on f4 is a very powerful bishop. It's attacking all the way up and down this whole open space through the middle of the board. You want to try and keep it if you can. Anthony, you can't play pawn to h3 because it's black's move, and black could just play knight h5 on this move. So who can see what move can white play if black plays the move that's shown? Bishop takes h6. Joseph, you're suggesting bishop takes h6. If you do that, black plays pawn takes h6. You've opened his king up a little bit, but you've really got not enough pieces over there to checkmate him, and you've just sort of lost a piece. Daniel suggested bishop to g3. You could just retreat your bishop. You could do that. If you retreat your bishop, he'll play knight takes bishop on g3, and you've still lost that powerful bishop. Bishop to e5, Michael, good suggestion. Putting your bishop on e5 here, then the knight will just take it. So still you're losing your bishop. Andrew, good work, Andrew Fiffield. Congratulations, Andrew. Brilliancy prize. Brilliancy prize. Andrew spotted if the knight goes to h5, threatening this bishop, white can play the brilliant move, knight takes d5. Brilliant move, knight takes d5. Right? If the knight takes the bishop, the knight just comes back and recaptures. Okay. If the pawn takes, then bishop goes down to c7 and wins black's queen. Great move, Andrew. Well done. All right, so there's a little tactic in this position. Okay, if the knight moves away, bang, you've won the queen in a couple of moves. All right, let's move on. Moving on. Knight f8 for black, and white plays pawn to h3, getting a square for his bishop to retreat to, so that if the knight h5 plan to try and swap off that bishop, he's going to save his He's going to save his bishop. Black plays bishop d6. That black square bishop is very powerful, and white's now happy to exchange bishop for bishop because it's getting rid of black's good bishop. That's the bishop that's on a black square, maneuvering in between all of black's pawns, attacking all of white's pawns. So he's quite happy to exchange off bishop for bishop now in this position. Exchanges off bishop for bishop. He's got a small advantage here. He's got rid of black's good bishop. Rook b1, next move. And a lot of people who didn't know about the minority attack would think, gee, that's a strange looking move. Like, why would you play rook to b1? The natural move looks like rook c1, putting your rook onto an open file. Now the plan for white is, as we saw right from the start, the pawn wants to move forwards to b5, doing a pawn break, guaranteeing an exchange of pawn for pawn, and his rook's then going to come out along an open file. So that's white's plan. He's putting the rook onto b1 so he can push that pawn forwards to b5, use the pawn from b5 to exchange off pawn for pawn, right? And then create open files on the b file and the c file, on the b and the c file. All right. Black plays bishop to d7, and here comes the minority attack. You see, black has got not even close to shooting the pawn forwards from f5 to try and get a pawn break. So a pawn break is an attacking strategy. It's an attacking strategy. So you want to use the attack as quickly as you can to get some open files. Black's not getting a chance to do that attacking strategy. Queen e7. Let's have a look at what's going on here. b5. Anthony said, what about black playing pawn to a6? And pawn to a6 is a way of slowing down the attack, but white will just respond with pawn to a4, and it doesn't really slow it down for that long. a6, a4. Darcy's saying, what about knight to e5? Yep, knight e5's a move that can happen at any time. So we want to try and get this pawn break happening first. We can do knight e5 at any time. If you put your knight onto e5, you definitely don't want to take that bishop on d7, because if you take the bishop on d7, that's his bad bishop, and your knight on e5 is going to be in a really good position. So you'd rather not put your knight onto e5 and then swap it off. So you can play knight e5 whenever you want to. All right, the four possibilities that exist here is, number one, black might take your pawn. If black plays pawn takes pawn, two things that white gets. Number one, white gets black with a weak isolated d pawn in the middle of the board. Okay, so if black plays pawn takes pawn, isolated queen's pawn. Very good, Joseph. Isolated queen's pawn. Second thing is, if he plays pawn takes pawn, white gets an open file to attack down. Okay, so number one, weak pawn. Number two, open file. If black doesn't take, right, if black just leaves it, then white can take black's pawn, and black has two choices. He can take back with the pawn or the bishop. Taking back with the pawn leaves an open file on the b file for white, and it leaves his pawn on c6 weak, backwards pawn. We've seen those at the start of the lesson. If he takes with a bishop, isolated queen's pawn, and still open files on the c file and half open file on the b file to attack. So no matter what happens, black's going to be worse off. Sasha's suggesting, can you play rook to b8? Yes, you can play rook to b8. It doesn't solve your problem of having a weak pawn on c6. The whole point of the minority attack and what we're trying to learn from this game is about weak pawns. In this position, black can't help but have a backwards pawn on either c6 or b7, and one of those pawns is going to be weak, and you'll see what happens later on when you end up with a weak pawn. It means that all your pieces are tied down to protecting it, and if all your good pieces are protecting a weak pawn, that means that they're not attacking somewhere else. So let's see what happens. Jamison suggested rook c8, which is a good idea of putting your rook onto the c file. Sasha's suggestion of playing rook c8 and c5. The question is, do you have time to play pawn to c5? And when you play pawn to c5, if white takes you and you're left with the isolated pawn on d5, can you protect that pawn on d5? And the problem is, because it's quite late in the game, white's going to have enough control over d4 that the pawn from d5 can't push forwards, and if the pawn from d5 can't push forwards, it'll be weak for the whole game. So c5 is a good way of avoiding this minority attack. We're going to have a test in a couple of minutes. Hopefully in about 3 minutes' time we'll get this test underway. So c5, good idea. If he gets taken, it leaves that d pawn a bit weak. All right, knight to e4. Let's see what happens. White plays knight to e5. We've talked about that being a good move. A knight in a very strong spot in the middle of the board. Who's also threatening to win the pawn on e4. Knight takes c6. Queen takes c6. All right, so exchanging off pieces, really helping white with the attack down the c-file. There's the rook c8 move that a couple of people suggested, putting the rook onto what will potentially become an open file or a half-open file. And now white plays pawn takes pawn. Black has to choose here. Does he take with the bishop or does he take with the pawn? If he takes with the bishop, he's faced with this problem down the b file. If he takes the pawn, he's still got a problem on the c file and the b file. So he takes with the bishop. Right, taking with the pawn would allow rook to b7 straight away. Exchanging off here. If we just go back a move and you say, well, what about rook takes c6? Unfortunately, rook takes c6 loses a pawn to queen to b3, because then the queen attacks the weak pawn on b7 and the weak pawn on e4. So remember what we said about weak pawns. That's an isolated pawn here and a backwards pawn on b7. When they're vulnerable, you end up having to play moves that you'd really rather not play. So he plays pawn takes, and now this sort of solidifies the pawn structure for the rest of this game. Black's got a backwards pawn on c6, white's got an opened file on the b file. Black can no longer play rook b8 to try and challenge the b file, because then rook takes b8 and the c pawn drops. So black can't really go for this b file. Got to just spend the rest of his life protecting this horrible backwards pawn on c6. Okay, let's see what happens. Ben suggested bishop a6, but rather than play bishop a6, we've got a bishop on a really strong square in the middle of the board. Let's just build up all our pieces onto the c and the b files and pile up down those open files where we really want to try and attack. Okay, it also stops black from playing pawn to c5, transferring his weakness from c6 to d5, because if he plays c5 now, white's got enough pieces just to take it for nothing. All right, as soon as the queen moves off the 7th rank and trying to protect this pawn on c6, it allows, Darcy, you've got a good suggestion, but it allows the queen to come in onto, the rook's going to come in on the 7th rank here. This is going to be the most powerful spot along the 7th rank. You'll notice that while people have suggested chucking in rook to b7 first, queen c2 is a great threatening move. Right? He's threatening bishop to f5, winning the rook, putting his queen into a better position for later on, and then next move he's going to throw rook down to b7. Sasha's asked the question, in this position, why does he have to protect the pawn on c6? And the point is, you don't have to protect the pawn on c6 right now. Right? You're not threatening to take it, but you will have to protect it at some stage. Right? Because white's going to move his queen out of the way and then maybe play queen c5 and double up rooks. Eventually that pawn is going to be attacked some more. Now, if you don't protect it now, Sasha, the question is, what's black going to do? All right? What's black going to do? There's not much more that black can do. All right, let's just keep on going. It won't take long to see. After rook to b7, The rook's now dominating the 7th rank, and all we have to do is find a way to keep the attack rolling. And what you'll find is a common strategy is when you've got an attack on one side of the board, right? You've got an attack on this queen side. Black's tied down all of his pieces to protecting these pawns on the queen side. The rook's protecting a7, the rook's protecting c6, queen's protecting c6, everything's protecting the queen side. We're going to change direction and we're going to zoom over towards the king side and get an attack on the king side. Andrew suggested bishop takes knight, but then queen takes. If we play bishop g4, black's now in zugzwang. There's really nothing black can do without losing a pawn. If he moves the rook on b8, he loses the pawn on a7 or the pawn on c6. If he moves the rook from c8, he loses the pawn on c6. If he moves the knight, he loses the rook. If he moves the queen, he's going to lose pieces as well. So there's really no good moves for black to play in this position. He plays king g7, right? No other moves. Zugzwang, good question, Andreas. Andreas said, what's Zugzwang? Zugzwang's a position where any move that you make is a bad move. So there's like nothing you can do. You've got only bad moves to make. No matter what you move, you're going to lose something. So black is here in a position which is pretty much like Zugzwang. Any piece that he moves, he's going to lose one of his pieces. Right? If he moves his queen, queen f5 and takes the pawn on f7. If he moves the rook, he loses the pawn here. If he moves the a rook, he loses his a pawn. Sasha suggested queen f5, which is a very powerful move, threatening to take the pawn on f7. It's more powerful when the king's on g8. So this is a sneaky move where he just plays pawn to g3, not weakening anything, just strengthening his pawns a little bit, allowing his king to move, and black still has no good moves. So the only move black can do is now to play king back to g8. Once he moves his king back to g8, now the queen comes into f5 and attacking the pawn on f7. So you see what he's done is he was attacking on the queen side, black's put all of his pieces over there to protect the queen side, and now white simply switches to the other side of the board. All of his pieces aim towards the king side, and black can't get his pieces over there fast enough to protect them. Knight comes back to protect the pawn on f7. We can't get to h7 to give a checkmate. We can't really attack anything more on f7 because our rook's in danger. So rook comes to d7, hitting the queen. Queen e6, hoping to try and swap off. Attacking the queen and then coming back, forcing the exchange of queens now on g6. And we can see some more of those bad pawn structure elements, the backwards pawn on c6, the doubled pawns on the g file, the isolated pawn for black on a7. And so it's just now a question of time. How can white attack and win all of those pawns? And nobody saw it. The move rook d5. Okay, people have seen rook takes a7 and a couple of other rook moves, but rook takes d5 is the best one. Pawn takes, and now the question is, should you play rook takes rook or bishop takes rook? So what would you play in this position? Would you play rook takes rook on c8 or play bishop takes rook? Yeah, most people would suggest rook takes rook, I think. Problem is, it's not the best move. Your rook on c1 is a much more powerful piece than his rook on a8. Right? Much more powerful piece. If you had to say which is a better rook, the rook on the open file or the rook in the corner of the board, you'd always choose the rook on the open file. So much rather play bishop takes, doesn't get to swap off, but you does mean that you've got a powerful rook on an open file and he's got a rook in the corner of the board. So that's why bishop takes is a much nicer move. Black gets his rook into the attack, but white's rook is in a much more powerful position. On the 7th rank, black's knight's in a bad position on the edge of the board. Got to move his pawn out of the way. Rook c5 threatening two pawns at the same time. So now black's going to lose a pawn guaranteed. Bishop moves to attack that pawn, still guaranteed loss of a pawn. And we just go through the last couple of moves. And in this position here, black resigned. Black's two pawns down. His knight can't move anywhere. The rook's in a much more powerful attacking position, and white's got 2 passed pawns that are going to zoom down the board, and he's going to win the game from here. All right, so we've seen a really powerful idea about weak pawns and strong pawns. We're going to get a test up on the screen, and you're going to get an opportunity to try and do this test. I'll give you about 5 minutes to try and solve. There's a few questions in the test that should come up on your screen any moment now, and you'll be able to go through and answer those questions. Test should be on your screen now. No, it's not there yet. Give it a moment. It should be loading up. All right, a couple of people are starting to see it now. I don't know why it's taking so long to get the test up on the screen. But it should be there for a few people now. Yep, okay, good. We've got a few people who are getting the test on the screen. May, have you got a question for us, May?
Yes, why isn't it showing up?
I don't know why the test's not showing up yet. A couple of people can see the test and a couple of people can't. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I might try. Oh, there's a few people. A few people are seeing the test, so we'll see how it goes. I might close it and start it up again for a few people. Okay. Oh. Good work, Max. You're the first one finished. Well done, buddy. Nathan, you got a question for us?
Oh, I just did the test. Came up. I got a couple incorrect, but I meant to click the correct ones.
Oh, you meant to click mouse slip. Well, it's on your permanent record now, Nathan.
That's okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Max. So Max, you can chat to everyone now and tell him that yourself that he's failed. Andrew, you got a question for us?
Oh, okay. Do you get marked on question 4, which is like a written answer?
You don't get marked by the computer, you get marked by me.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. But I mean, it's describing question 3, isn't it?
It is describing
your answer
that's
to
right.
question 3.
Question 4
Okay.
it's explaining your answer to question 3. That's right. Alex only just got the test now, so we are running very slowly. Some of them only just got the test now. Roy, I'm unmuting you. Hi, Roy. Roy, hello. Have you got?
Oh, sorry, it can make it longer.
Do you need it, Roy? You got a question? No. All right, Darcy, what's your question there? I'm just going to get to you, Darcy.
Am I on?
You're on, Darcy.
Oh, yeah, I had the same problem with Max, but it's loaded for me, so there's nothing wrong with mine now.
Oh, great. Good. So it's just.
Oh, good. Yeah, when they were saying it wasn't loading, I wasn't sure if I had the right one.
Right. It's just taking a while to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
No worries, Darcy, no worries. How are you going, Matthew?
Good. How do we watch the video, like when you put it up?
I'll send you an email so you'll have a link to the video. And look, I appreciate everybody's patience going through all of this stuff because it is new and it is challenging. We're trying to get the audio right, we're trying to get the interaction going, and it has been a really challenging day today, so I appreciate your time and patience. And we're going to just keep making sure that we try and improve it each time. All right, so yeah, there will be a video of this. I'll send you all an email with a link so that you can watch the video later on.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right, how are we going with the tests, guys? We've got 68% done. I'm going to give you a few more minutes to do those. Jamison, you're on the air.
We haven't got a test yet. Yeah, we haven't got a test.
You still haven't got your test yet? Oh. Nah. All right, I'll try restarting it for you guys as well, see how we go there. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on. Andreas has lost his test. Joseph, what's happening there? Joseph. Are you there, Joseph? Chris. Hello, Chris.
Did you say we have to start the test again because some people didn't see it?
Yeah, I think a few people haven't seen it, so I'm going to be restarting it if you haven't seen it.
But do we have to do it too?
No, if you've done it already, you only need to do it once. That's fine. Yep.
Alright, put your hand down.
Thanks, Chris. Anthony.
Hey, I'm back. I just had an issue with the internet, so I actually had to restart the whole thing.
Okay.
I'm back now. Is there any...
A test should be showing up on people's screens reasonably soon.
Yeah, I've only just started.
Yeah, that's okay. 92% of people have done it, so we're doing okay. I'm just going to mute you, Anthony, and keep taking questions from people. Ben, what's up?
I still haven't got the test page either yet.
It's because you live so far away. It takes ages to get there.
Yeah, but I still haven't got it.
Brett, have you got yours, Brett? Sorry, Brett, have you got your test yet? Okay, Brett, how are we going? We're still waiting for a few people who haven't got theirs. How you going, Ben? There yet?
Still not here yet.
Still not there. See, the thing is, you live in Gippsland, so it's a long way away, although I'm interested to know whether Brett's got his, because he's in Mildura, and Darcy's got his done. Congratulations, Darcy. I'll be emailing you guys some homework. Thanks, May, for having yours done. Max, you're finished now. You can go and do some real homework, hey, buddy? Yeah, Darcy's in King Lake. He's got his.
Yeah. The weird thing is that Matt got his first, so Matt's done and finished his. So
Matt's done his, and you haven't got yours.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Sorry about that. Hang on, let me just have a chat to May. What's going on, May?
Before you were talking about the online test, do we have to go on it?
So I'll send you an email with a few places where you can play chess online against some people, and I'll give you some homework.
Okay, so can we go out now?
Yes, you can log out now. Thanks very much for being here, May. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
So we're finished now?
Yep. If you've done your test and you've had a look at everything, then by all means you're welcome to stick around and ask me some questions. But you can log off now. I know we're way over time, but there you go. You can log off and disappear. I will email you all guys some homework so that you've got some homework to do.
With number 7, did you actually tell us what number 7 was, or yes?
The answer to number 7.
Yeah. Did you tell us that during the coaching? I missed that.
It might have been one of the dropouts. I'm doing my best.
Okay. Okay, I got everything but that, but. Right.
All right, Max and Alana, thanks very much for being here. We'll see you guys later on. Max is gone. Good. Brett, how are you going, Brett? Darcy, how about you?
Good. I just wanted to know, the first RJ Shield tournament for this year's on at the end of February, isn't it?
Correct. The last Sunday of February is the first RJ Shield.
Yeah, and they have them at 2 new locations, don't they?
That's right. So you've got 3 different RJ Shields to choose from.
I'm muted.
There's one on at Fitzroy, isn't there? Because I think that one would be better for me to go to.
Yep, that's probably the closest one, so you can go to that one.
Okay, yeah, because it's a bit easy to get down there.
Yeah,
so
that's
thanks
fine.
For that.
No worries. We'll see you later on. And we do have another lesson tomorrow night, so people can come back tomorrow night and have another go. Jamison reckons he would have got 100%. I think not.
I won't be able to make it to tomorrow's one. I got something else on, but I should be back on Thursday.
No problems. Well, whenever you can make it, make it. If you can't make it, you'll be able to watch the recorded versions later on. Okay. I'm going to unmute everybody, so it's a free-for-all. People can talk now.
Cool.
Do we just like log? Do we just close it?
What?
No, that's not working well.
Same time as
Anyone hear me?
Oh, that was a bit much.
Can hear me.
That was a bit too much.
Do we
Everyone's
just
screaming
close
at
it?
the same time. Yeah, when you've finished, you can just close it down and then that logs off. You can just say goodbye, just log off. There's no problems there. All right, so if you've got questions, stick your hand up. You can chat to each other. You can chat to me. You can ask whatever questions you'd like. I think we're all done on the tests now, so I'm just going to close that down. If anyone wants to see the test results, here are the test results. 72% average score for people who are interested.
Hey.
Yes. Yes.
David.
You can hear me? I can hear you. Anthony, you should be able to talk now. I'm not sure why you can't. All right, how are we going question-wise? Not sure why you're muted, Anthony. I'm trying to unmute you, but it doesn't seem to want to let you do that. Anyone else got any questions before we finish up for the day? All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up for now. Thanks, everyone, for being on the line. Thanks for your patience. We'll have a chat to everybody later on, and I'll give everyone a call today or probably tomorrow to find out how it went for you. And, yeah, we'll see how it all went. We'll have a bit more of a chat. We'll test it out again tomorrow night and see how you go. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night.